This man and his loyal German shepherd thought they were just taking their usual trail through the Appalachian woods, until the dog froze, growled, and dragged him toward something tangled high in a fallen tree. An old military backpack, perfectly dry, in a place untouched for decades. Inside, half a burned map, a damaged recorder, and the name of a soldier everyone believed had deserted his post. But what they discovered next would expose the truth he died protecting, and reveal a miracle that only time and God could bring back to light. Stay with this story. Let it remind you that courage never disappears, and truth always finds its way home. If this message touches your heart, please subscribe for more stories of hope, faith, and second chances. And thank you, truly, for being here with us today. The early morning fog settled thick and unmoving over the Appalachian Mountains, casting the entire valley in a pale, ghostly haze. The temperature hovered just above freezing, cold enough that every breath left a faint cloud drifting in the still air. The nearby town of Pine Hollow, a small, isolated community tucked between two ridges, was barely waking up. Only a few cabin chimneys released thin trails of smoke that dissolved into the mist. The forest surrounding the town was damp, quiet, and unusually heavy, as if the mountain had chosen to hold its breath. In this cold silence, every sound, every cracking twig, every rustling leaf, echoed louder than it should. It was in this subdued, almost sacred atmosphere that James Walker started his morning walk with Rex. James, 42, was a man who carried his past on his face. Years of rescue missions with the National Guard had carved sharp angles into his features. His jaw was square and slightly shadowed with stubble he often forgot to shave. Thin scars traced faint lines along his cheek and forehead, reminders of debris, explosions, and nights buried under rubble during search and rescue operations. James's build was strong but lean, the type of strength forged through hardship rather than gym routines. His shoulders were wide, his brown hair peppered with early gray strands, and his eyes, deep steel blue, held a mixture of resilience and quiet grief. The grief came from losing his wife, Emily, in a car accident 3 years prior, an event that silenced part of him and pushed him into a simpler life near the mountains where they had once dreamed of retiring. Beside him trotted Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with thick, sable-colored fur that blended into the forest shadows. Rex had strong, muscular legs, intelligent amber eyes, and upright ears that twitched at every tiny sound. He was a rescue dog James had adopted 2 years ago. The dog had been abandoned as a pup and carried a small scar on his right flank, an old injury from surviving on the streets. Despite that past, Rex was friendly, loyal, and extremely sharp, with a natural instinct for tracking. James often joked that Rex understood emotions better than most humans. Their morning routine had been the same for months. Follow the narrow trail beside the creek, check the trees for signs of storm damage, then circle back toward the cabin. But today, there was something different in the air, an odd tension hidden beneath the fog. James felt it. Rex sensed it too. About 20 minutes into their walk, the trail curved sharply around the edge of a small ravine created by years of rushing water. Fallen leaves coated the ground, mixing with patches of wet moss and mud. The fog thickened there, pooling heavily in the low places. James heard the creek before he saw it, soft, muffled gurgles reaching through the white curtain. Rex walked ahead, nose close to the ground, tail moving slowly. Then suddenly his posture changed. His ears shot forward, his muscles tightened, and he released a sharp, urgent bark. Before James could react, Rex bolted off the path toward a cluster of downed trees. "Rex! Easy!" James called, pushing aside wet branches as he followed. The dog didn't pause. He barked again, this time louder, deeper, his "I found something" bark. When James finally reached him, Rex was standing on his hind legs, paws pressed against the trunk of a fallen oak. James's breath caught when he saw what Rex had discovered. Tangled in the upper branches, hanging almost unnaturally, was an old military backpack. But not just old, out of place. The surrounding forest was untouched except for recent storm debris. This area had been abandoned for decades after a landslide blocked the old Ranger Road. No one should have been here for years. Yet the backpack looked recently placed. The fabric was faded olive green, but completely dry, as if it had been spared the rainstorm 2 nights ago. No leaves, no dirt, no mold clung to it. And that made the unease in James's stomach tighten. "How the hell?" he murmured. He reached up and tugged the pack free from the branches. As soon as it came loose, Rex sniffed it intensely, circling it with a sharp, restless energy, his ears lowered, then lifted, as if torn between curiosity and caution. James noticed faint scratches on the metal buckle, fresh ones. Someone had handled this pack recently. Kneeling down on the wet leaves, he carefully opened the main zipper. Inside, the smell of old paper and metal greeted him. He pulled out a half-torn map, its edges burned or deteriorated by age. The remaining markings showed part of the mountain range, including Old Pine Ridge, a long-abandoned area known for the large landslide nearly 20 years ago. More surprising was the second item, a military identification patch, still in good condition despite the pack's age. The embroidered name read, S. Turner. James froze. The name was familiar in a way that made the hair along his arms rise. Samuel Turner, S. Turner, had been part of a National Guard patrol team that vanished the year James first enlisted. The official report had declared Turner missing in action, presumed dead after the landslide. But rumors had whispered of something else. Some claimed Turner deserted. Others said he uncovered something he shouldn't have. Some stories painted him as a traitor, others as a ghost. James remembered standing in a briefing room years ago, overhearing older soldiers talk about Turner with a mixture of respect and suspicion. Looking at the patch now, James felt the weight of all those stories pressing on him. Rex nudged his arm, sensing James's sudden stillness. The dog's tail lowered, and he let out a soft whine. "Yeah," James whispered. "I feel it too. The backpack shouldn't be here. The patch shouldn't be here. The map, torn, hidden, shouldn't be here. And none of it should be dry after days of rain. Something was wrong. Something or someone had brought this here recently. And that meant the past wasn't buried after all. James carried the old military backpack back to his cabin. The fog still draped across the Appalachian slopes like a heavy curtain that refused to lift. As he stepped inside, the warmth from the wood stove softened the stiffness in his fingers, and the familiar scent of pine resin greeted him. The cabin, humble and weathered, was a sanctuary he had built after losing Emily. Photographs hung on the wooden walls, some showing rescue missions, others capturing quiet memories of his late wife, her dark hair and warm smile forever frozen in time. Rex followed closely behind, his paws tapping lightly on the wooden floor. The German shepherd had not relaxed since they found the pack. His ears twitched at every metallic rattle from the zippers, and his eyes, bright and amber, stayed fixed on the mysterious object. The dog's unease made James even more certain that the discovery was more than just a forgotten military relic. James set the backpack on the table, spread open under the glow of a single overhead lamp. He removed the half-torn map and the fabric patch marked S. Turner, placing them aside. Then he pressed his fingers along the interior lining again. There, an odd, firm bulge hidden under the stitched layer. He carefully cut through the old fabric, revealing a compact device no larger than his palm. It was a mini voice recorder, an older military model used decades ago for quick field logs. The casing was scratched, the buttons nearly worn flat, and a thin crack split its side. Dust and corrosion clung to the edges, but strangely, the recorder wasn't destroyed. If this thing had been buried for 20 years in the mountains, time had treated it far too gently. Rex sniffed the device intensely, then let out a low sound. Not aggression, but recognition, as if the scent triggered something instinctive in him. James placed a calming hand on Rex's head before grabbing his small repair kit from a drawer. He clicked open the casing. Inside, a wire had snapped, and another pin hung loose. With practiced patience, James soldered the connection back together. After several tense minutes, the tiny screen flickered, dim but alive. He pressed play. Static filled the room, loud enough that Rex lifted his head sharply. After a moment, a strained male voice broke through the interference. Hoarse, weak, the voice of someone injured or exhausted. If someone finds this, go to Old Pine Ridge. I don't have much time left. The message cut off abruptly, swallowed by distortion. James stared at the recorder, the words pressing down on him like a weight. Old Pine Ridge. The name belonged to one of the darkest chapters of the mountain's history. 2 decades ago, after days of relentless rain, the ridge collapsed in one of the worst landslides the region had seen. A National Guard patrol team vanished under the earth. All bodies were eventually recovered except one, Samuel Turner. James remembered Turner from the stories older soldiers told. Turner had been tall and wiry, with sandy blonde hair, pale skin, and sharp, alert eyes. He wasn't loud or boastful. He carried himself with quiet discipline. But during his final months, he had changed. Some said he grew withdrawn. Others claimed he became suspicious of transport routes and new personnel. Turner reportedly made vague comments about something being wrong, something he couldn't yet prove. Some brushed it off as stress. Others whispered that he had uncovered something dangerous, and when he vanished, the rumors only darkened. James set the recorder down slowly. "So you weren't just a story," he muttered. "You were trying to warn someone." Rex nudged the backpack again. Every time the metal zipper struck the wooden table, Rex tensed. James had trained Rex through gunfire, sirens, collapsing structures. Nothing rattled him like this. Whatever scent or memory the backpack carried, it wasn't normal. A sudden knock on the cabin door startled both of them. James's hand moved instinctively toward the hunting knife on the counter. Visitors were rare this early in the morning. He approached the door and opened it cautiously. On the porch stood a man James had not seen in months. Deputy Mark Ellison, a local officer in his mid-40s. Mark had a solid, broad-shouldered build and a neatly kept brown beard that framed a steady, no-nonsense face. His uniform jacket was damp from the lingering fog. Mark was known around Pine Hollow as calm, fair, and stubbornly thorough. Years earlier, he had lost his younger brother in a mountain accident during a storm, an event that made him especially serious about safety and truth. "Morning, James," Mark said, his voice firm but not unfriendly. "Saw your truck wasn't on the road. Everything all right? James glanced back at the table, at the map and patch lying in plain sight. Yeah, he said slowly. Found something unusual in the woods. Rex barked once at Mark, not out of aggression but alertness. Mark raised an eyebrow. Rex isn't usually this on edge. James hesitated, then stepped aside. You'd better come in. Mark entered, wiping his boots and scanning the table. When he saw the patch, his expression changed. His steady demeanor cracked just slightly. That can't be real, he said quietly. Turner's case was closed years ago. James shook his head. Looks like it wasn't closed properly. Mark exhaled, long and troubled. Old Pine Ridge again. Nothing good ever comes out of that place. James looked at Rex, who growled softly at the recorder. Maybe, James said, but I think someone wanted this to be found. The sky above Old Pine Ridge had turned a bruised shade of gray by the time James and Rex reached the forest's edge. Wind swept down from the higher slopes, shaking branches and sending loose pine needles swirling through the air. The ridge loomed ahead, dark, heavy, and unsettling. Even after 20 years, the land still bore scars from the massive landslide. Deep gouges cut through the hillside, and entire sections of the forest leaned unnaturally, as though the mountain had never fully recovered. The air carried a faint metallic smell, a sign of an approaching storm. Rex stayed close to James's side, ears stiff, nose twitching as he assessed scents carried by the wind. James tightened his jacket. The cold was sharper here, biting through fabric like tiny knives. He followed a narrow, overgrown trail he remembered from old training maps, a path once used by patrol teams but abandoned after the disaster. The farther they walked, the darker the forest became. Trees grew denser, their branches knitting together overhead until the daylight dimmed into a thick twilight that made shadows stretch unnaturally long. Rex suddenly paused. His nose dropped to the ground, tail stiffening like a rod. He took a few steps forward, sniffed again, and let out a low growl. You got something, James murmured. Rex moved carefully through the underbrush, weaving between ferns and fallen branches. James followed, pushing aside thick clusters of brush until he reached an old military trench, one of the defensive structures built decades ago for training exercises. Now it was half collapsed, filled with wet leaves, mud, and tangled roots. But Rex wasn't interested in the trench itself. The dog's attention was fixed on something buried near one of the remaining sandbags. He scratched at the pile of leaves, revealing a corner of something blackened. James crouched and pulled it out carefully. It was a small journal, its leather cover scorched and brittle. The edges were charred, as though it had been exposed to fire long ago. When James opened it, flakes of ash drifted into the air. Most of the pages were destroyed, but a few fragments remained intact near the center. Handwriting, hurried, slanted, desperate. James squinted at the partially burned sentences. Not safe anymore. They're using the ridge to move shipments. If I'm caught, everything ends. Must hide the evidence. Turner had written these words. James recognized the disciplined, neat hand from old reports. So Turner hadn't deserted. He hadn't run. He had been hunted. James felt something knot inside his chest, anger, and something close to guilt. The world had forgotten Samuel Turner too easily. His name had been smeared with rumors. His loyalty doubted. His story buried beneath mud and silence. As he turned the fragile pages, another piece of writing caught his eye. Short, jagged. They're close. The last entry ended. There. No date, no signature. Before James could study it further, Rex's growl deepened. The dog lowered his body, ears pinned back, eyes focused on the dense tree line to their right. James immediately stood, slipping the journal into his jacket. He scanned the forest, but the thick undergrowth made visibility poor. The wind howled, carrying with it the sound of rustling leaves. But then, beneath the noise, a soft crunch, a footstep, then another. Someone was here. "Show yourself," James called out, his voice steady despite the tension curling in his stomach. Silence answered. Rex moved 2 steps forward, growling low and warning. His fur bristled, the way it did when he sensed a threat rather than an animal. James placed a hand on the dog's back, both to steady him and to ground himself. A shadow flickered behind a fallen log. James tensed, ready to reach for the hunting knife strapped under his jacket. But before he could react, another sound rose. Slow, deliberate, like someone repositioning their weight on soft soil. "Who's there?" James shouted again. Still no answer. Only the wind and the groaning of old trees. Rex barked sharply. James took a cautious step back. He had learned long ago never to chase shadows in hostile terrain. Whoever was out there was watching them and didn't want to be seen. His instincts screamed at him that they weren't dealing with a lost hiker or curious local. This was something calculated, purposeful. The same type of presence Turner might have been hiding from 20 years ago. "Rex," James said quietly, "we're leaving. Now." The dog didn't resist. He backed up with James, keeping his gaze locked on the woods until they retreated to the trail. Even once they were far enough away, Rex continued to look over his shoulder, tension still radiating from his posture. James clutched the burned journal inside his jacket. Turner's warning wasn't just a relic from the past. Someone was trying to keep that past buried. Night settled heavily over Old Pine Ridge, the kind of darkness that swallowed shapes and softened the edges of the world. Rain began as a light drizzle, tapping against the branches, before building into a steady downpour that smothered all other sounds. James moved quickly through the wet underbrush, Rex close at his heel, until they reached the old cabin Turner had mentioned in the burned journal, a place long forgotten on any official map. The cabin was small and crooked, its wooden planks warped by years of storms. Moss crept across the walls, and the single window was cracked and fogged. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and cold ash. It was barely shelter, but it provided a momentary refuge from the worsening storm. James lit an old oil lamp sitting on a table, its flame flickering weakly, casting long shadows across the walls. Rex paced the perimeter of the cabin, nose low, tail stiff. He was restless, not afraid, but aware. The German shepherd's silhouette, large and muscular with dense fur darkened by the rain, looked almost spectral in the dim light. "Easy, boy," James whispered, though he felt the same tension crawling beneath his skin. He took a seat near the wall and examined the burned journal once more. Turner had described this cabin as a temporary shelter during his final days, a place where he hid something too important to carry while being hunted. James scanned the cabin's interior. Rickety table, broken chair, stone fireplace, but nothing looked out of place. Then Rex stopped. His ears shot up, and he stared intensely at a section of the wall near the back corner. Slowly he approached it and pawed at the wooden boards. "What is it?" James asked as he knelt beside him. A faint, hollow sound answered when James tapped the panel. A hidden compartment. Using his knife, he pried the panel loose, revealing a dusty cavity carved into the cabin's structure. Inside lay a small metal box, rusted around the hinges but still sturdy. James opened it. Inside was an old external hard drive, wrapped carefully in layers of fabric and plastic. The casing was worn but intact, with faint military markings etched along one side. Turner had hidden this, and whatever it contained had been important enough to die for. Before James could inspect it further, Rex growled, low, deep, and unmistakably dangerous. The dog turned toward the window, body tense like a drawn bow. James extinguished the lamp instantly. Darkness swallowed them. A second later, a beam of white light slashed across the window, sharp, searching. Another beam followed, then footsteps. James moved silently across the cabin, positioning himself beside the door. Rain hit the roof in heavy sheets now, masking some of the intruders' movements, but not their voices. "Check inside," a rough voice ordered. The tone was sharp, impatient. A second voice answered, deeper and grittier. "Boss wants everything Turner touched. No more mistakes." James recognized the type. Men hardened by greed, not duty. Their silhouettes passed the window, each man broad-shouldered and dressed in dark outdoor gear. One of them held a flashlight with a taped handle. Another carried a crowbar. The third man stayed farther back, tall and lean, his posture rigid, likely the leader. The door rattled, then the crowbar pierced through the wooden frame. James slipped the hard drive into his jacket, whispered "Go," and pushed open the back door just as the front exploded inward with a crash. Rex darted out first, his powerful legs launching him across the mud. James followed, sprinting into the night. The cold rain struck like needles, soaking him instantly. Behind them, the intruders shouted and stumbled over broken boards. "Get them!" Flashlights swept violently across the trees. Shadows flickered erratically as the beams bounced off the falling rain. James moved with the instinct of a trained soldier, keeping low, avoiding exposed ridgelines, using the terrain to his advantage. Every step was deliberate despite the slippery mud. Rex stayed ahead, guiding him through the dark forest, as though he knew the land more intimately than any map could show. A gunshot cracked through the night. Bark splintered from a tree inches from James's shoulder. He ducked and veered sharply downslope. The forest blurred into streaks of black and gray as they ran. Wind howled. Branches clawed at James's jacket. Through it all, he clutched the hidden hard drive tight against his chest. Behind them, the intruders crashed through the forest, but the storm drowned their footsteps. The rain grew heavier, turning the trail into a stream. Rex led James toward a narrow rocky passage carved by centuries of weather. "Good boy," James panted, following him into the natural shelter. The space was small but concealed, shielded by thick roots and jagged stone. They pressed against the rock wall, listening. Flashlights scanned the area outside, but the beams didn't reach the crevice. "Spread out! They couldn't have gone far!" the leader barked. Their voices faded gradually into the storm. James exhaled shakily, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He rested a hand on Rex's neck. "You saved us again," he whispered. The dog pressed closer, still alert but calm enough to breathe steadily. James looked down at his soaked jacket, feeling the weight of the hard drive inside. Turner had hidden this for a reason, and now James carried the same burden. Whatever truth the device held was powerful enough to attract the same men who hunted Turner to his death, and they weren't stopping anytime soon. The storm had passed by the time James and Rex reached Pine Hollow at dawn, both soaked and exhausted, but alive. The clouds were thinning, revealing streaks of pale gold stretching across the sky. James didn't stop at his cabin. He drove directly to the Regional Federal Investigation Bureau field office 2 towns over. a modest stone building staffed mostly by older agents nearing retirement, the type who had seen too much to be easily surprised. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed softly. A receptionist guided James to a conference room where Agent Laura Kincaid soon entered. She was in her early 50s, tall and lean with a commanding posture. Her hair, steel gray tied tightly into a bun, framed a face lined with experience and authority. Her eyes were sharp hazel, observant and cool, the kind that weighed every detail before allowing emotion to surface. Laura had once been known as one of the Bureau's toughest field agents until a knee injury ended her field career. Now she was assigned to cold cases and special inquiries. James placed the hard drive and Turner's burned journal fragments on the table. Laura listened without interruption as James recounted everything. Finding the backpack, the map, the hidden recorder, the cabin, the attackers. Rex sat at James's feet the entire time, steady and attentive, his coat still damp but his posture alert. When James finished, Laura leaned back, fingers interlaced. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that Samuel Turner may not have been a deserter, but a whistleblower hunted by an organized smuggling group that's still active?" "Yes," James replied, voice firm, "and they want this." He tapped the hard drive. Laura studied him carefully, first his tired eyes, then the bandage on his arm, then Rex's protective stance. Finally, she nodded. "We'll take it from here." Another agent entered. Ethan Morales, mid-30s, medium build, with short black hair and a trimmed beard. Ethan had a friendly face but wary eyes, the type of man who tried to stay optimistic despite years of grim investigations. He took the hard drive with gentle, methodical movements, as if aware it carried the weight of a dead soldier's last effort. "We'll run a secure extraction immediately," Ethan promised. If Turner hid this, he knew what he was doing. Let's hope the data survived. Hours passed. Laura offered James coffee. He refused, too restless to sit still. Rex paced quietly, occasionally nudging James's leg as if sensing his internal tension. Finally, Ethan returned with a USB in hand and a stunned expression. "You need to see this." Inside the monitor room, James stood with Laura and Ethan as the first decrypted files appeared. Maps, shipment routes, photographs of hidden storage sites, names, dates, records of illegal transfers using abandoned forest paths, routes Turner must have discovered, and then grainy footage. Turner himself recording on the same hard drive. He looked thin and exhausted, his sandy hair matted with dirt, his pale face bruised. But his eyes, sharp, loyal, unwavering, stayed fixed on the camera. "If this reaches anyone, tell them I didn't run." His voice trembled but held courage. "They're using Pine Ridge, using our land as cover. I won't let them get away with it." The video ended abruptly. Laura exhaled, something softening in her gaze. 20 years, she murmured, and this is the truth he died trying to reveal. James felt his chest tighten, not with shock, but with a sense of responsibility. Turner had fought alone. Now his story would finally be heard. Within days, raids were launched across the region. The smuggling ring, large, complex, and hidden for decades, was dismantled. Several arrests followed, including the group's leader. And just as James suspected, the men who attacked the cabin were part of the same organization. The Bureau issued an official report clearing Turner's name. His surviving family, 2 nieces living out of state, received the notice with tearful gratitude. A small memorial attended by local veterans honored Turner as a soldier whose bravery had been overlooked for far too long. A week later, James walked with Rex back toward the forest trail where everything had begun. Morning sunlight filtered through the trees, warming the cold soil. The air was quiet, not ominous like before, but calm, respectful, almost serene. When they reached the old tree where Rex had first sensed something unusual, James stopped. He took Turner's identification patch from his jacket pocket. The fabric was worn, the threads slightly frayed, but the embroidered name remained clear. James pressed the patch onto the bark of the ancient tree, securing it beneath a small wooden wedge he carved from a broken branch. It sat there gently, like a humble memorial. "For your truth," James whispered, "and for your courage." Rex sat beside him, tail resting softly on the dirt. The forest around them remained still, as if listening. James straightened, took one last look at the patch, and walked back down the trail with Rex at his side, carrying forward the story of a soldier who had fought in silence and whose voice finally echoed into the world. Sometimes in life, miracles don't arrive in a burst of heavenly light. Sometimes they come quietly, hidden inside an old backpack, in the loyalty of a dog, in the courage of a man who refuses to give up on the truth. Just like James and Rex found their path in the darkest night, each of us also walks through moments where everything feels heavy, confusing, or hopeless. But remember this: God never forgets what is true. He never lets a good heart disappear in silence. And even after 20 years, He can bring justice to someone who was wronged. He can shine light into the deepest parts of our past, just like He did for Samuel Turner. In our everyday lives, we may not be chased through the woods or uncover hidden evidence, but we all face battles the world doesn't see. Pain we carry, memories we try to heal, and fears we silently fight through. And yet, every sunrise is a reminder that God is still working, still guiding, still protecting us in ways we don't always recognize. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that truth always rises and that God's timing is never late, I'd love for you to share this video with a friend who needs encouragement today. Please leave a comment about what part of the story moved you the most. Your words may inspire someone else who feels alone. And if you'd like more stories about hope, kindness, and second chances, remember to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful stories for everyone, especially for those who need a gentle reminder that miracles still happen. May God bless you, keep you safe, bring peace into your home, and lead you through whatever season you're facing. Thank you for watching. God be with you.